outside is tucked away beneath a soft velvet curtain of midnight blue. And as you settle into the warm embrace of your pillows, imagine a high stone clock tower where the air is perfectly still and carries the cool, clean scent of iron and ancient dust. Inside the tower, a single small candle burns steadily upon a wooden ledge, casting a long and rhythmic amber glow across the massive iron gears and the heavy oak beams that have stood for hundreds of years in the quiet dark. There is a faint, hypnotic ticking that pulses through the room, a slow heartbeat of metal and wood that tells the story of the passing night in a language of quiet clicks and steady, mechanical sighs. You are invited now to let your own breath slow down to match the steady, peaceful beat of the clock, and to drift away into the gentle, repetitive motions of the tower. Let the cool air wrap around you like a soft cloth as we enter this quiet space where you may truly rest. Chapter 1. The silence of the early hour is a deep and liquid thing, filling the small room where the clockkeeper sleeps, and he stirs long before the first bird is thought to sing, his eyes opening slowly to the familiar patterns of the shadows on the stone walls. He stays very still for a long time, listening to the absolute quiet of the house, and he feels a deep, heavy sense of peace as he pushes back the thick wool blankets to stand on the cool, solid floorboards of his room. He dresses in the dim light, his fingers moving with a quiet and practiced memory over the soft linen of his tunic and the worn leather of his belt. And the house remains entirely silent around him, a stillness that feels like a kind and gentle weight pressing softly against his skin as he moves toward the tower door. He reaches for the heavy iron ring of keys that hangs by the entrance, the metal clicking softly and musically in the dark, and he selects the largest key, feeling the cold, heavy iron in his palm as he slides it into the lock with a slow and deliberate motion. The door opens on well-oiled hinges, and he begins the long and rhythmic climb up the winding stone stairs, his leather boots making a soft and muted thud against the granite, a sound that is as steady and grounding as a heartbeat. He moves with a slow and measured pace, never rushing, for the night is still his own, and the height of the tower requires a patient heart and a steady breath. The air grows cooler as he climbs, a fresh and bracing chill that smells of the high sky and the distant rain, and he finds a comfort in the repetition of his steps, one after another, higher and higher into the quiet dark. He reaches the upper chamber where the great machine lives, and he stays on the threshold for a moment, simply breathing in the atmosphere of the room, which is thick with the smell of grease and metal and the dry, sweet scent of the wooden beams. He finds his candle on the ledge and strikes a small light, watching the tiny flame bloom like a golden flower in the dimness. And a soft, golden circle of light begins to spread across the heavy gears and the coils of thick rope. He gathers his tools from the wooden chest, the oil can and the soft cloths, and the heavy iron winding handle, laying them out in a neat and orderly line on the workbench where they catch the flickering glow. He checks each tool with a slow and practiced hand, feeling the coolness of the metal and a smoothness of the wood, and he feels a deep and abiding contentment in the readiness of his craft. The air in the tower is starting to brighten just a fraction as the first hint of gray filters through the narrow slits in the stone, casting long and soft shadows that stretch across the floor to touch the far corners where the weights hang in their own patient silence. He feels the coolness of the morning air on his face and the warmth of his own steady breath, a perfect balance of sensations that makes him feel grounded and safe, anchored in a moment of time that belongs only to him and the quiet preparations of the day. There is no hurry, no need to rush, for the clock moves at its own pace, and the sun will rise when it is ready. And so he lingers over each small task, polishing a brass cog with a scrap of soft cloth, or simply standing still and listening to the deep, resonant silence of the tower walls. His breath is slow and steady, matching the pace of his hands, and as the world below begins to stir in its sleep, he feels a deep and abiding peace, knowing that everything is in its place and the day is unfolding exactly as it should, one slow and gentle movement at a time, while the stars still watch from above, and the gears wait, and the light grows, and the tower remains a sanctuary of peace and time. Chapter 2. Within the heart of the tower, the great iron wheels begin their slow and patient dance, as the clock keeper begins the long and meditative task of winding the weights. His hands grasping the heavy iron handle with a relaxed and steady strength that feels like the turning of a great, silent wheel. He fits the handle into the winding square, hearing the small metallic click as it seats itself, and then he begins to turn it in a slow, rhythmic circle, feeling the immense weight of the stones as they begin to rise toward the rafters. Round and round he goes, the motion starting in his shoulders and flowing through his arms, a hypnotic cycle that feels like the swaying of tall grass in a summer breeze. Turn, click, breathe. Turn, click, breathe. And the resistance of the mechanism is a steady, comforting weight that keeps him anchored in the present moment. He watches the thick hempen rope as it winds slowly around the wooden barrel, the fibers looking golden and soft in the candlelight, and the sound of the ratchet is a rhythmic and musical song that fills the quiet room with a sense of order and purpose. He moves with a steady, unhurried pace, his body swaying slightly with the rhythm of the turn, and he finds that his mind becomes as quiet and clear as the air above the clouds, far away from the worries and the noise deep, all-encompassing peace that makes his limbs feel loose and relaxed, even as he works. And the only sound in the world is the soft, rhythmic ticking of the escapement and the steady, heavy thud of the winding pawls. He pauses occasionally to apply a few drops of oil to a spinning axle, the liquid falling in slow, heavy beads that look like liquid gold in the dim light. And he watches as it spreads over the metal, making the gears move with a silent and fluid grace. He touches the surface of a large brass cog with his fingertips, feeling the incredible smoothness of the teeth and the faint vibration of the machinery, a low and steady hum that seems to travel up his arms and settle in his heart. The light in the tower is changing now, the pale gray of the dawn turning into a soft and buttery yellow as the sun climbs higher behind the distant hills, and the dust motes in the air dance in the thin beams of light, moving in slow and lazy spirals that mirror the clockkeeper's own repetitive movements. After the winding is finished, he takes a soft cloth and begins to wipe the dust from the escapement wheel, moving his hand in a slow and careful arc that follows the curve of the metal. And he finds a quiet joy in the cleanliness and the perfection of the machine. He stands back for a moment to look at his work, watching the way the gears interlock and move with such absolute precision. A tiny world of logic and rhythm that exists in the silence of the stone. He listens to the heartbeat of the clock, a steady tick-tock, tick-tock that seems to measure the very stillness of the air, and he feels a deep and humming peace that radiates out from his chest to his very fingertips as the hours pass in a blur of quiet productivity. He does not rush the adjustments, for the time cannot be hurried, and so he embraces the slowness, letting the repetition wash over him like a gentle tide that pulls away all his worries and leaves only the peace of the tower. He watches a small spider spinning a web in the corner of a high beam, its movements as slow and deliberate as his own. And he feels a kinship with every quiet creature that moves through the world with purpose and grace. As the great wheels continue to turn and the weights begin their long, slow descent back toward the earth. The air is thick with the scent of old oil and dry wood, a combination that feels like safety and home and ancient wisdom. And as he sits on a low wooden stool to watch the movement, he feels a profound sense of gratitude for the quiet life he leads, for the gears that turn and the weights that fall, and the silence that listens to the ticking of the night. Chapter 3. A pale and silver light begins to touch the edges of the high rafters as the first hint of morning mist rolls in from the valley, and the clockkeeper feels a gentle, sleepy fatigue beginning to settle into his bones. He begins the final, quiet tasks of his watch with a body that feels heavy and pleasantly relaxed, moving through the chamber one last time to gather his tools and return them to their proper places in the wooden chest. He cleans the oil can and the small wrenches with a soft scrap of linen, wiping away the faint dust and the grease until the metal is bright and silver once more, and he places them carefully in their slots, hearing the small, final click of wood against wood in the quiet room. Click. Rest. Click. Rest. And he feels the weight of the day leaving his shoulders. He gathers the used candle stubs, the wax feeling cool and slightly tacky in his fingers, and he puts them away in a small pouch, leaving the workbench clean and ordered for the next time the shadows return. He stands for a moment in the center of the tower, looking at the great iron machine that continues to pulse with a steady and quiet life. And he sees the way the light has grown soft and blurred across the stone floor, the orange glow of his last candle looking pale against the coming blue of the day. The air is growing a little warmer now, carrying the scent of the damp earth and the first morning dew that clings to the stones of the tower, and he breathes it in with a sense of completion and peace, feeling the weight of his watch falling away as the world below prepares to wake. He moves to the candle on the ledge, extinguishing the flame with a slow and deliberate motion of his fingers, watching the tiny curl of smoke rise into the air and disappear into the gray light. And with each second of darkness that returns, the room becomes a little cooler, a little more quiet, and the ticking of the clock becomes a little more deep. He walks slowly down the winding stone stairs, his footsteps making a soft, rhythmic thud that echoes gently in the stairwell, and he feels the warmth of the house below rising up to meet him like a friendly embrace that pulls him closer to the earth. He reaches his small bedroom and feels the softness of the air on his face, a cool and refreshing breeze that carries the scent of the sleeping garden and the first morning birds. And he moves with a slow and fluid grace as he prepares for his own rest. He undresses with slow and practiced movements, laying his tunic across a wooden stool and feeling the lightness of his body as he steps into the cool, dark space of his bed, where the blankets are waiting for him like a warm and familiar world. He climbs into the bed, the linen sheets feeling cool and crisp at first, but quickly warming to the heat of his body as he pulls the thick wool blankets up to his chin, tucking them in around his shoulders until he is encased in a cocoon of warmth and safety. He lies there for a moment with his eyes open, looking at the dim outlines of his room, the familiar shapes of the chest and the chair, and the small window where the morning star still shines with a pale silver light. His muscles feel loose and heavy, every tension of the watch melting away into the soft mattress, and he lets his head sink into the pillow, his thoughts slowing down until they are nothing more than the gentle pulse of his own heartbeat. silence of the tower is still with him, a deep and liquid quiet that fills his ears and his heart. And he knows that the gears are turning, the weights are falling, and the world is exactly as it should be, safe and still under the watch of the time. He closes his eyes and breathes in the faint scent of oil and stone that lingers on his fingers. And as the house settles around him with a final gentle sigh, he drifts off into a sleep that is as deep and nourishing as the rhythm he has spent his night guarding. He feels the house around him, a sturdy shell of stone and timber, protecting him from the wind and the light. And he sinks further into the softness of the bed, his breath becoming a slow, rhythmic wave that carries him away. The world is far away now, a distant and hazy place that has no power over the stillness of his room. And he is a part of the iron, a part of the stone,